So, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I've got a bit of a cold, so if it's a common cold, so it's pretty normal. But I would like to mention it because, if you hear that I'm kind of sad or something like that, it's not because of Dora. It's just because of the cold. So don't worry about that. So welcome. My name is Matthijs. I'm a business consultant with VI Company. Last webinar, we dove into the European Accessibility Act. And if you missed that, just be sure to check it out through our website on the Insights article. Today, we're focusing on the Digital Operational Resilience Act, or DORA, and its impact on financial institutions. So let's dive right in. The talking points for today. We'll start off with an overview of DORA and what it means, what it is, some of the key provisions it has. Then we'll go over to the impact on financial institutions with some examples from VI Company and our special guest, Hester Rang from pension provider MN. Then we'll go over the steps you need to take to become compliant. We'll have the questions part of today, where you can type your questions in the Q&A section of this webinar, and we'll round off with a conclusion, a summary to see what we've learned today. So to start off with the overview of DORA. So DORA is the Digital Operational Resilience Act, and it's a regulation to make sure financial companies are able to fend off cyber attacks. That's in a nutshell what it is. The basis of DORA is NIS, Network Information Systems. And NIS is basically a directive that contains general guidelines where DORA is specific to the financial sector. NIS 1 is already in effect, has been in effect for a long time now, but NIS 2 will be in effect from October 2025, and DORA will be enforced from January 2025, or to be more specific, January 17th. So complying with DORA actually means complying with NIS 2, but complying with DORA does not mean that you're complying with other security-related measurements, such as PSD2 or PCI DSS. There are uniform requirements within DORA for ICT risk management processes, and the company's board is actually made responsible for complying with DORA, so that's an important one to keep in mind. This legislation applies to all member states of the European Union and also to companies offering services within the European Union. And like I mentioned in the intro, there are some key provisions that come with DORA, and we'll go over that right now. So the key provisions there are. So number one is an organization must have an ICT risk management framework. And the second one is that an organization must have an incident response process. So that's they should classify incidents and report on that incident and on those incidents as well. An important part as well is security testing. Security testing was already a thing before, of course. It's already made sense to do so, but it must be done more often, and it will be mandatory right now. Then the third-party risks must be mapped out. For example, the risks your suppliers run, and we'll dive into that at a later stage. And threat intelligence sharing will be mandatory as well. So what DORA also describes is the requirements in relation to contractual arrangements between financial entities and their third-party providers. So effectively, who is responsible, who does what is their classification, stuff like that. More on that later as well. And the rules for oversight framework for critical ICT third-party service providers is also described in DORA. And last but not least, the rules on the cooperation among supervisory authorities and on the supervision and enforcement. So how that is done, that's of course described as well. So why does DORA matter? Well, there are loads of examples within the financial sector where companies turned out not to be as resilient as they thought, or the suppliers they worked with were not as resilient as they thought. So why it matters? Yeah, just because it's just important to be resilient, to have your ICT infrastructure security just on at order. The impact it will have on the financial sector. So within DORA, the financial markets infrastructure is divided into two types of entities, namely large organizations and medium organizations. Large organizations being financial institutions with more than 250 employees or more than 50 million euros in turnover. So they are marked as essential, whereas the other organizations are marked as important. So what does this mean? It means there is a difference in monitoring method. So the essential entities will be proactively monitored to see if they are resilient, and important entities will be monitored after the fact. So they will only have to report after the fact, after a cyber attack has occurred or an cyber incident has occurred. Then they will have to account for that. So either way, there will be a focus on incident process and reporting. And in any case, there will be mandatory pen tests every 3 years, or at least every 3 years for now. So we spoke to KPMG, one of our partners, and they stated that it is expected that requirements to manage ICT third-party providers will require the most effort from financial entities. And why is that? Because due to the widest gap between the current and the future required state. And obviously managing how to close the gap between those two states. So what we did at VI Company is, of course, we've checked ourselves for DORA compliancy, and we came across a number of things that stood out that we would like to share with you as well. And one of our security officers conducted that impact analysis. So it's highly important to maintain a register of information, and a register of information details all the critical or important functions covered by third-party services. And the key here is to maintain it, because updates and reporting on it will be continuous. So it's highly important to do that. And here's an example of one of those registers of information. And I'm speaking about third-party services here specifically, but it basically goes for the entire DORA legislation. So for your entire ICT infrastructure. So here, like I said, there are some examples of how you can scale that in terms of the third-party services. For example, the types of contractual arrangements, the possibility of reintegration, and the impact of a discontinuation of the IT services from that third-party provider. So furthermore, we are expecting contractual adjustments on our side. So more on that in a second. We've noticed that we are already ISO 27001 certified, which means that a large part of what is described in DORA we already comply to. So that's a good basis for DORA. And for those who don't know, ISO 27001 is all about information security. So that's why it makes sense that it's also ties in with DORA. It's important to read up on the standards, the technical standards from DORA, and a new policy product, as they call it, will be available in July, and those state all of these standards. So it's gradually becoming available, and so everyone can read up on it and comply where needed. So now I'll hand it over to Hester from MN to tell you more on the contractual side and basically their experience on DORA. So Hester, up to you.
Okay, thanks Matthijs for the introduction. To introduce myself, I'm with MN Services, who is an asset manager, basically no longer pension administration. We outsourced that to PGGM, actually effective 1st of July. But nevertheless, we are heavily involved, of course, as a financial institution on DORA. At MN, we have started now, first of all, to identify which suppliers we have and in which category they fall under. By doing so, we started on the processing. How do we process our information, and which applications fall under that process? Is that critical, non-critical? We are in early stages, but we're starting now to address our suppliers, and we're starting with the ones we believe are the critical ones. For those clients, or suppliers, it will mean that a more heavy contract or a more important contract and contractual arrangements have to be made compared to the suppliers that are non-critical. But nevertheless, all suppliers with somehow an ICT part in their service will have to sign additional agreements with our organizations to be compatible to DORA. We've worked together with DOFAs, like a lot of our peers, to set up contracts, standard set of contracts, and then in two flavors, basically, one for the critical clients, suppliers, and one for the non-critical suppliers. We have not yet sent out these templates or these new arrangements, and we're very curious to see how our suppliers are going to react to that. But basically, everybody has to do something with that. We have to sign these agreements. We've also seen that some suppliers will have their own contract sets, which is fine for us. I mean, I can understand that suppliers like Bloomberg would not like to have amendments from all their clients in their own formats, but that they will come with their set of contract amendments for us to look at and then to sign, which is all for us, for MN, that's fine. That's fine. We perfectly understand that. But nevertheless, it is a lot of work to make sure that our contracts are in place, the correct contracts are in place. But that's not the only thing that is of importance with DORA. I think that what comes after that, and you mentioned that already, Matthijs, is the information registration, and the reporting of that to the regulator is even more of a burden to companies. A burden, but something we really have to address and to look into, how that we keep control of our suppliers. And how do we do it? How do we fill in that information register, and how do we report? Incidents have to be reported as well to the regulator. And also our management needs to be involved as well in DORA. Under DORA, management needs to know what's going on with also these suppliers. So we are looking into how can we make some sort of a dashboard for our management team, that they can see what's going on with our suppliers, if there is something that needs their attention as well, as management, with what's happening in the with our suppliers. On the next slide, there's probably a little bit more of an overview of what is important. So not so much on the contract side. Yes, we have to monitor the contracts, but really the steps important for companies like ourselves to keep control of our supplies, because that is basically what DORA wants. They want that we are in control of our suppliers. And I hope that this overview a little bit gives a good idea and impression of where we have to focus on. I think I've said it. Is there something you would like in addition, Thijs, at this point, or shall we leave it for the audience?
No, well, let's leave it for the audience for now. I do have some ideas, but I don't want to spoil everything for the audience. So we'll probably dive into that at the questions section for today. So thank you, Hester, for your insights. So now we'll look at the step-by-step process. So how can we work towards complying? That's the basic question. And you've already mentioned something on that as well, Hester, but let's dive into it. On the internal side, so there needs to be a GRC framework, as it's called. Basically explaining how the board manages security risks. So like you said, it's highly important that the board is involved in this, and this is where that comes in as well. Companies need to ensure a solid incident management process, and testing of ICT technologies should be available as well, and then on the operational side and on the resilience level. So externally, we've already mentioned it, and spoiler alert, we will mention it again. Companies need to check their third parties. Are they compliant? And what happens in case of a breach? The service providers need to be categorized, and you've already named one of the possible categories. But basically, it's up to the financial companies to determine which categories they can decide on, and what actions they need to take with those categories. They need to take we need to add mandatory clauses, especially for critical and essential functions, and include contingency plans, security measures, and pen testing. So let's break it down step by step. The mapping, that's where it starts. Is there already a GRC framework in place? And if so, maybe it needs to be updated. If not, obviously it needs to be created, and according to the policy products I mentioned before from DORA. It's good to identify and classify your critical assets, to check and document on the ICT dependencies. And like I mentioned, ISO 27001 is already a good starting point, but also 22301, that's for business continuity management, is also a good starting point. So once you've mapped everything, you need to do a gap analysis. So you need to check what's the status of the current security test, for example. What's the status of the framework? What are the processes and who is responsible within your organization? What critical applications are there within the organization? And obviously, how secure are they? And then after the gap analysis, after a thorough look at the current versus the desired state, we need to transfer those findings into solutions. So we need to implement those solutions, both on incident the process, such as documentation, and maybe also code updates to prevent stuff like a code injection from happening. So it might be necessary to add additional technologies. And one final step should be to make sure that you have a test program or a test plan. asking questions like, what am I going to test? When will I test it? How am I going to report on what I've tested? And you need to have that in place for the upcoming years. So you should find a partner with the capacity to help you execute those tests. So where can VI Company help? You might be wondering. We can help on the gap analysis part. We've got strategic consultants and security officers to provide you with a full service gap analysis for that. On the implementing side, we can offer our technical expertise because we've got a lot of senior developers, great developers who know everything about the technical changes that need to be implemented, and we can definitely help you there. And then there's the testing part, where we've got years of experience testing the solutions we've created our own, and also the related ICT infrastructures for those solutions. So we can definitely look at your solution as well. Some further actions that need to be taken. You should really talk to the suppliers. So take the appropriate actions over there. Check the contracts with those suppliers, both the existing contracts and the templates you've got, to make sure that future contracts are on par as well. And also just talk to other financial companies about best practices, because you're not alone in this. The entire financial industry needs to comply. So just do that. There's no shame in it. So then over to the questions. Let's see if there are questions from the audience at this point. And you can type the questions in the Q&A section. Oh, there's one. Who will be the regulating authority? Well, there are three at this point. There is the European Banking Authority, or EBA. There's the European Insurance and Occupational Pensions Authority. That's a mouthful. And there's the European Securities and Markets Authority, so ESMA as well.
Yeah, that's within in Europe.
Yeah,
general.
True.
I believe that in Holland, well, at least MN will have to report to AFM.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. So there's a European part and there's a Dutch part, and then the cooperation part comes in as well, of course.
The format of the report in the information register is identical all over Europe, that's for sure.
Yeah, makes sense. Because, well, having a European legislation makes sure that it's all uniform. So that's, yeah, like I said, that makes sense. So what are the consequences if we don't comply? Well, there will be fines, I'm guessing, but I'm sure you know something about that as well, Hester.
Well, it's a law, so you have to apply to law. So I could imagine that if you don't apply, that you might lose your license, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that might even be the ultimate penalty they can hand out. Yeah, that makes sense. Right. Any other questions? No, anything you would like to share, Hester, at this point? Maybe some additions to what we've been saying so far.
Yeah, I know that banking industry already had ABA. You're already referring to that, but I was for that you also had to be in some sort of operational control. DORA takes us a little step further. And what we've seen in the information register, it's a lot of information that they require. So it's really good to step into that and look into that as soon as possible, if not already done. I know that most of our peers already are taking their steps, but if not, really do so.
Yeah, that's a good one, because I think that a lot of people forget that it's already we're already going into the second half of this year, and in January you really need to comply. So if there's an incident on the 18th of January, then you can't say, "Oh no, I didn't know about DORA," because, well, you should be aware of that, and you should have taken action.
There are at the moment dry runs going on with the regulator, so they already giving some additional information what is required in the information register, but that can be of help for companies.
Yeah, it's
We
a good
were
one.
in a call. The first call was last, I think, Monday. I was in there. It was some 2,000 people, I think, in the call then, all
Wow.
of Europe taking
Yeah,
part in the dry run. So yeah.
nice. And what were some of the outcomes there? What were some of the
Well,
things discussed?
basically, it was a one-way stream. We were not allowed to say anything.
As that goes with regulators, but yeah.
Exactly. But it's really the first set now was to go into what fields are in there and how is it looked at and what format and a little bit going into that. But that will be going into depth. There are some, what might be interesting for this as well. There are some gray fields which suppliers really fall under DORA. We are saying that it's an ICT Resilience Act, but what falls under ICT? And also that also applies to the definition of companies like ourselves. Are we an ICT provider, like our clients would like to say we are, or are we a financial institution? And that definition will also come from the regulator. They will look into certain organizations. How far are they coming under the DORA legislation?
Yeah. All right. So, in essence, do you have to comply to DORA, or is there some other regulation you need to comply to?
Yeah,
Or
well,
which
we
form you need
definitely
to
fall under
comply?
DORA, but in what
Mhm.
way do we fall under DORA? And
Yeah,
how do some of our supplies, do they indeed fall under DORA or not? Take, for instance, external managers or brokers or research providers, marketplaces. They are already regulated. Do you need to make sure that you have a DORA amendment contract with them?
yeah, 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 yeah. That's a good addition. Thank you for that, Hester. So I don't suppose there are any other questions. So we'll go to the next section, which is the conclusion. So a short summary of what we've discussed. DORA provides provisions on how to mitigate your ICT security risks. Risk management is key, and the Register of Information is a part of that. The board is held accountable. Also, something to note. You should really take action now and dive into your operational and resilience processes if you haven't done so already. Get consensus with your third-party suppliers and learn from other financial companies and maybe participate in one of those dry runs that Hester just mentioned. That might be very interesting as well. So do your homework and take action. And that's it for today. So are you interested in a gap analysis? Make sure to contact me or contact my colleague, Benno Lockhorst from our sales division. And then I would like to thank you all for joining in. And well, Hester, thank you for participating and for all of the information you've shared with us today.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you.